The cry in the park. The world still clung to the last remnants of night when 16-year-old Ethan Walker jogged through Maplewood Park. It was a ritual he rarely skipped. His morning run before school, a quiet time before the world fully woke up. The sky was a soft shade of gray, the park lamps still flickering from the cool night air. His father, a retired firefighter, had instilled discipline in him from a young age. "Stay sharp, Ethan. The world isn't always fair, but you can always choose to be prepared," his father often said. And so, Ethan ran, strengthening both his body and mind. Today, however, his routine was interrupted. A soft, almost imperceptible cry made him slow his pace near the wooden bridge that stretched across the small creek in the park. Ethan came to a full stop, his breath misting in the cold air as he listened. Another cry, this time a little louder. He turned his head toward the cluster of thick bushes near the bridge. A sense of unease settled in his chest. The park was usually empty at this hour except for the occasional jogger or dog walker. Carefully, he stepped off the path, pushing branches aside as he moved toward the sound. Then he saw it. Nestled within a thin, faded blanket, barely visible among the fallen leaves, was a tiny baby girl. Ethan's breath hitched. His first instinct was disbelief. Was this real? Who would leave a baby here? His heartbeat thundered as he crouched beside the bundle. The infant was small, her face pink from the cold, her tiny fists clenching and unclenching as she whimpered softly. She couldn't have been more than a few days old. Ethan swallowed, his hands trembling as he carefully lifted the baby. She was cold but breathing steadily. He immediately shrugged off his hoodie and wrapped her in it before pressing her close to his chest. "Hey, little one," he whispered, his voice shaky. "You're okay. I got you." His mind raced. What should he do? Who would abandon a baby like this? He scanned the area, hoping, almost praying, that someone would come running, shouting, claiming the baby. But there was no one. Just the rustling of the trees and the distant hum of the town waking up. Then something caught his eye. A small, neatly folded note tucked inside the blanket. With careful fingers, he pulled it out and unfolded the paper. The words were scribbled hastily, the ink smudged in places. "Please take care of her. Her name is Lily. I had no choice. I love her more than anything." Ethan's chest tightened, his mind flooded with questions, but there was no time to waste. With one arm securely holding the baby and the other pulling out his phone, he dialed 911. "This is Ethan Walker. I just found an abandoned newborn in Maplewood Park, near the wooden bridge. She's alive but cold. Please send someone quickly." The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional, but Ethan could hear the urgency behind her words. "Stay where you are, Ethan. Keep the baby warm. Help is on the way." Ethan took a deep breath, looking down at the little girl in his arms. "I don't know who you are, Lily," he murmured, "but I promise you're safe now." Part 2. A Family's Decision. The flashing lights of the ambulance and police cars painted the park in alternating reds and blues. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, their faces a mix of concern and efficiency. A female paramedic named Jennifer approached, holding out her hands. "You did good, kid," she said as she carefully took the baby. "She's stable, but we'll need to get her to the hospital for a full checkup." Ethan felt a pang in his chest as he watched Lily disappear inside the ambulance, but he knew she needed professional care. Officer Garrett, a middle-aged man with graying hair, approached him. "You found her here?" he asked. Ethan nodded and handed over the note. The officer read it, his jaw tightening. "We'll need to investigate, but for now, she's in safe hands." As the commotion settled, Ethan realized he still had one important call to make. He pulled out his phone and dialed home. After a few rings, his mother answered. "Ethan, it's early. Is everything okay?" He took a breath. "Mom, I found a baby." Back at home, Ethan and his parents sat around the kitchen table, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. His mother, Caroline Walker, was a nurse, a woman with an enormous heart and fierce protective instincts. She listened intently as Ethan recounted everything. His father, Tom Walker, remained silent for a long time, his fingers tapping against his coffee mug. Finally, his mother spoke. "She needs a home." Ethan's eyes widened. "Wait, are you saying we should?" His father leaned forward, his gaze serious. "We can't decide that ourselves. The authorities will place her in foster care." Caroline frowned. "Tom, you know how broken the system can be. What if she ends up bouncing from home to home?" Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest. The thought of Lily being placed with strangers, possibly never finding a permanent home, made him uneasy. "I don't know why," he admitted, "but I feel like I was meant to find her." Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. Taking in a baby is a huge responsibility. It's not just about wanting to help. It's about being able to provide for her properly. Caroline reached across the table, placing a hand on her husband's. "Tom, we've talked about fostering before. This could be our chance to actually do it." Ethan looked between his parents, his heart pounding. "What if we just try?" he suggested. "At least until we know what's going to happen to her." Tom exhaled heavily, but nodded. "All right, we'll talk to Child Services and see what they say." A small flicker of hope ignited in Ethan's chest. Maybe, just maybe, Lily had found a family after all. Part 3. The first night. The process wasn't easy, but after several background checks and paperwork, the Walkers were granted temporary guardianship of Lily. When they brought her home for the first time, the house felt different. Ethan stood beside the small crib they had set up in the corner of his parents' room. Lily, now cleaned up and dressed in a tiny onesie, lay curled up, her soft breaths barely audible. His mother placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She's going to need a lot, Ethan. Diapers, formula, sleepless nights. Are you sure you're ready for this?" He looked down at Lily, her tiny fingers twitching in her sleep. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted, "but I know I don't want her to be alone." Caroline smiled, pressing a kiss to his temple. "That's all the reason you need." That night, Ethan lay in bed, listening to the soft sounds of the baby monitor. Every whimper made his heart race. Every cry sent him scrambling to check on her. At some point, exhausted, he drifted into a light sleep. But just as dawn broke, a sharp knock on the front door jolted him awake. His parents were already up, and as Ethan rushed down the stairs, he saw his father cautiously opening the door. On the porch stood two men in dark suits, their expressions unreadable. "Mr. Walker," the taller man said, his voice smooth but firm. "We need to talk about the baby." The unknown claim. The air in the Walker family's home had shifted. It was no longer just a place of warmth and familiarity. It was now a fortress, its walls containing more than just a family, but a fragile life they had unexpectedly found themselves protecting. The two men at the door were not ordinary visitors. Ethan stood frozen at the foot of the staircase, his mind still foggy from sleep, but the tension in the air snapped him into focus. His father, Tom Walker, stood firm, one hand gripping the doorframe as he assessed the men. "Who are you?" Tom asked, his voice steady but edged with wariness. The taller man, dressed in a charcoal suit with an unsettling calmness about him, spoke first. "My name is Jonathan Pierce, and this is my associate, Mr. Langley. We represent an interested party regarding the infant in your custody." Caroline Walker, who had been cradling Lily upstairs, now appeared at the top of the staircase, her arms tightening around the tiny bundle. She immediately recognized the authoritative tone, the careful way they chose their words. These men were not here for a friendly conversation. Ethan's stomach clenched as he moved closer to his parents. "Who exactly is this interested party?" Tom demanded, his firefighter instincts kicking in. Pierce smiled, a smile that did not reach his cold, calculating eyes. "We represent Mr. Martin Holloway." The name meant nothing to Ethan, but his mother stiffened. "Holloway." Caroline echoed, her voice laced with recognition. As in Holloway Industries. Pierce's smile widened slightly. I see you're familiar. Tom crossed his arms. What does a billionaire business tycoon want with a baby abandoned in a park? Langley, the shorter man, finally spoke, his tone sharp. Mr. Holloway believes the child in your care may be his biological granddaughter. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. What? Caroline's arms instinctively pulled Lily closer, as if shielding her from the sheer weight of the revelation. That's impossible, Tom said firmly. This baby was left in a park with nothing but a note. No name, no identifying information. How could you possibly know she belongs to Holloway? Pierce's gaze remained locked on Tom's. That's what we intend to find out. If she is, she has a place in a family far more suited to care for her than you. The insult in his tone sent a wave of anger through Ethan. With all due respect, we're taking care of her just fine. Caroline snapped. If this man truly believes she's his granddaughter, why is he sending his lawyers instead of coming himself? Langley stepped forward, his presence uncomfortably invasive. Mr. Holloway is a very private man. He doesn't involve himself in affairs unless absolutely necessary. He straightened his cuffs. This can be handled smoothly. A simple paternity test will confirm everything. Caroline and Tom exchanged glances. A silent conversation passed between them. And what if the test comes back negative? Tom asked. Pierce's expression remained unreadable. Then we'll leave. But if it's positive, you will relinquish custody immediately. Ethan felt his hands curl into fists. This felt wrong. Lily wasn't a commodity to be claimed by whoever had the most money, and something about the way these men spoke sent alarm bells ringing in his head. We need time to think, Caroline said, her voice calm but firm. Pierce took a step back, as if he had expected that answer. Of course. You have 48 hours to comply. If you refuse, we will be forced to take legal action. Tom's jaw tightened. We'll be in touch. The two men exchanged knowing looks before finally stepping off the porch. The sleek black car they arrived in hummed quietly as they climbed inside. Within moments, they were gone. But the unease they left behind remained. A family's crossroad. The house was eerily quiet after the men left. Tom closed the door, locking it before turning to face Caroline and Ethan. Caroline sat down on the couch, still cradling Lily in her arms, her fingers absent-mindedly stroking the baby's soft hair. Ethan could see the wheels turning in her head, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. I don't trust them, Ethan said suddenly. His father sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Neither do I. Caroline looked up. But what if they're telling the truth? Her voice was softer now, less defensive. If Lily really does have a family out there, people who want her, do we have the right to keep her from them? The thought made Ethan's stomach turn. Mom, look at the way they acted. They didn't care about her. She's just some Holloway heir to them. Do you really think she'd be better off in their world? He gestured toward the window where the black car had disappeared. Tom sat heavily on the couch beside Caroline. I don't want to make this decision based on emotion. We have to think rationally. If they can prove she belongs to them, legally speaking, we wouldn't have a choice. And what if they're lying? Ethan countered. What if they just want her because of money, or because she's some kind of scandal they need to clean up? Caroline exhaled sharply, rubbing her forehead. There's only one way to find out, Tom said. A DNA test, Ethan muttered. Caroline finally looked up, her expression conflicted. If we do this, we do it on our terms. We need to find out who Martin Holloway really is. Ethan nodded, determination solidifying inside him. Then let's start digging. Uncovering the truth. That night, while Lily slept soundly in her crib, Ethan sat at his desk, diving into research. He typed Martin Holloway into the search bar, his eyes scanning through dozens of articles. CEO of Holloway Industries. Billionaire. One of the most influential figures in the country. But then something stood out. A tragedy. He clicked on an old newspaper headline. Mysterious car crash claims the life of Amelia Holloway, daughter of business tycoon Martin Holloway. Fiancé still missing. Ethan's heart thumped as he read the article. Amelia Holloway, the billionaire's daughter. She had died nearly 8 months ago in a car crash. The article mentioned a fiancé, someone named Daniel Royce, who had disappeared after the accident. A missing father, a dead mother, and a baby abandoned in a park. The pieces clicked together in Ethan's mind. Was Lily Amelia's child? Was Daniel Royce the father? And if so, why had he disappeared? Had someone made him disappear? Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a custody case anymore. This was something much, much bigger. He immediately called his mother over. Caroline's eyes widened as she read the article, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk. "Oh my God," she exhaled, looking at Lily in the crib. Ethan's mind raced. "Mom, what if she was left in the park because someone didn't want her found?" His voice was low, urgent. "What if the men at our door aren't looking for her out of love, but because she's the last piece of a scandal they need to cover up?" Caroline's hand flew to her mouth. Tom, who had been silent, finally spoke. "We need to get answers, and we need to do it fast." Buried secrets and hidden dangers. The house felt smaller now. The walls, once filled with warmth and laughter, now carried the heavy weight of uncertainty. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open to the article about Amelia Holloway, a woman he had never met, yet someone who might hold the key to Lily's true identity. His mother, Caroline, sat beside him, rubbing slow circles into her temple, deep in thought. His father, Tom, paced the room. His firefighter instincts had trained him to act in emergencies, not sit idly by. A missing fiancé, a dead heiress, and now a baby left in a park, Tom muttered, rubbing his beard. None of this adds up. Ethan scrolled further. The article detailed Amelia's mysterious car accident, how she was found in an overturned vehicle just outside the city limits. The report stated she was alone when paramedics arrived. There was no mention of Daniel Royce, no signs that he had ever been in the car. If she was pregnant at the time of the accident, Caroline murmured, looking at Lily asleep in her crib, then that means Lily was born sometime after. Ethan's stomach twisted. What if Daniel Royce didn't disappear on his own? Tom stopped pacing, his expression darkening. You think someone made him disappear? Caroline inhaled sharply. And if they did, it means Lily could be in serious danger. The room fell into a thick silence. They had 2 days before the Holloway lawyers expected an answer about the DNA test. If the Holloways really believed Lily was their heir, why had they only started looking for her now? Something wasn't right, and Ethan wasn't going to wait for the answers to come to them. The diner and the missing man. Ethan decided to start where all whispers of truth began, a small-town diner. The Sunrise Diner was tucked between a pharmacy and a mechanic's shop, its neon sign flickering from years of neglect. He had read in an older forum post that Daniel Royce used to work here before his disappearance. Ethan entered, the smell of fresh coffee and buttered toast filling the air. A middle-aged waitress with tired eyes wiped down the counter, glancing up as the bell above the door jingled. "Welcome in, Honorable, take a seat anywhere." Ethan hesitated, then approached the counter. "Actually, I was hoping you could help me with something." The woman, whose name tag read Marge, raised an eyebrow. "Depends. What are you looking for?" Ethan took out his phone, pulling up a grainy photo from an old social media post, one of Daniel Royce, standing behind the diner's counter, arms crossed, a cocky smirk on his face. Marge's expression froze. "You know him?" Ethan asked, watching her closely. She wiped her hands on her apron. "Used to. Danny was a good kid." "Was?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "A year ago, he just vanished. No goodbye. No forwarding address. One day he was here, the next, gone." Ethan's stomach churned. Did he say anything about Amelia Holloway? Marge's eyes narrowed. Who's asking? Ethan hesitated before answering carefully. I think he might have left something behind. Something important. Marge studied him for a long moment before sighing. Look, kid, I don't know much, but Danny was real nervous before he left. He kept looking over his shoulder, like someone was following him. Said he had to get out of town. Fast. Ethan frowned. Did he ever mention the Holloways? Marge hesitated, then leaned in. Listen, if you're messing with that family, be careful. The Holloways don't just have money. They have power. The kind that makes people disappear. Ethan's pulse quickened. What do you mean? Marge's gaze flickered toward the front door before lowering her voice. A man in a suit came asking about Danny right before he left. Same kind of guy you'd see stepping out of a black SUV. Clean-cut, polite, but dangerous. I told Danny about it, and he was gone the next morning. Ethan swallowed hard. So you think he ran? Marge sighed. I think he had no choice. A chill crawled down Ethan's spine. If Daniel Royce had fled for his life, then what did that mean for Lily? And who exactly were the Holloways protecting? The hidden birth record. Back at home, Ethan shared everything he learned with Caroline and Tom. Daniel didn't just leave, he ran, Ethan said, his hands gripping the kitchen table. If he knew about Lily, maybe he left to protect her. Caroline exhaled. But that still doesn't explain why no official record of her birth exists. Ethan's brain was already working through the next step. Unless someone erased it. His father frowned. How do we find proof she was born? Ethan had an idea. What if her birth wasn't recorded in a hospital? Tom and Caroline exchanged looks. What if she was born in a private clinic? One that doesn't release public records. Caroline snapped her fingers. Wait, I know someone who might help. An old friend from nursing school. She works in private medical records now. She grabbed her phone and dialed. Ethan and Tom waited in silence as she spoke in hushed tones. A few moments later, Caroline hung up. She's going to check. The next 2 hours were agonizing. Then Caroline's phone rang. She answered quickly. Did you find anything? A pause. Then her face paled. She placed the call on speaker. A woman's voice came through, hushed and nervous. I found something. A birth record. Amelia Holloway had a baby, but the file is flagged. Ethan's heart stopped. Flagged. It means someone tried to erase it. Tom cursed under his breath. Caroline pressed. Can you send it to me? The woman hesitated. I could lose my job. But if this baby is in danger, I'll do what's right. A notification dinged on Caroline's phone. A digital file appeared. Ethan rushed to look. There it was. Lily Holloway, born 7 months ago in a private facility under Amelia Holloway's name. No father listed. Ethan's breath came fast and sharp. Lily wasn't just a Holloway. She was the only remaining heir to one of the most powerful families in the country, and someone had tried to erase her. The trap is set. The next morning, the Holloway lawyers arrived again. Pierce's perfectly tailored suit was crisp as ever as he stepped onto their porch. Have you made a decision? Tom folded his arms. We have. Ethan stepped forward, holding up a sealed envelope. This contains the DNA test results, he said, lying smoothly. Pierce's eyes flickered. That was fast. Ethan smirked. You wanted confirmation, didn't you? Langley reached for the envelope, but Tom didn't let go. Before we hand this over, Tom said, we want to speak to Martin Holloway directly. Silence. Then Pierce's smile thinned. That won't be possible. Then we have nothing to say. Ethan crossed his arms. Your boss can either meet us in person, or we'll go to the press. I'm sure they'd love to hear how the Holloway family tried to erase their own bloodline. A tense pause. Then Pierce's lips curled into something cold. You're making a dangerous move, kid. Ethan stared him down. So are you. Pierce's jaw ticked. Then he turned sharply. "We'll be in touch." The moment they left, Tom exhaled. "Now we wait." Caroline glanced at Lily in her arms. "And we pray we made the right choice." The Holloway shadow. The next 24 hours passed like a slow-burning fuse. Ethan could feel the tension in his chest every time a car passed their house. His father, Tom, kept checking the security cameras, while his mother, Caroline, never let Lily out of her sight. They had made their move. Now, they were waiting for the Holloways to make theirs. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his phone in front of him, the screen dark except for one text from an unknown number. "Your demands have been received. Mr. Holloway will be in touch." It was unsettling. There was no name, no confirmation of a meeting, just a reminder that they were being watched. Tom sipped his coffee in silence, his sharp gaze flickering between the window and Ethan's phone. "I come like this. They're stalling." Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Or they're planning something." Caroline tightened her arms around Lily, rocking her gently as she whispered, "Then we need to be ready. An invitation you can't refuse." At exactly 5:00 p.m., the call came. Tom answered on speakerphone. A deep, gravelly voice filled the room. "Mr. Walker, I hear you've been looking for me." Silence fell over the house. Tom leaned forward. "I take it I'm speaking to Martin Holloway." A low chuckle. "Smart man. I assume you have what I need." Ethan could hear the coldness in his voice. This wasn't a man who was worried about his granddaughter. He was a man who wanted control. Tom didn't hesitate. "You want proof that Lily is your granddaughter? Meet us in person." A pause. Then, "You don't make demands of me, Mr. Walker." Tom's jaw tightened. "You're right. But I also don't give away a baby to a man who won't even show his face." Another pause. Then, "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the Holloway estate. Be on time." The line went dead. Ethan's stomach twisted. They were walking straight into the lion's den, inside the Holloway fortress. The next morning, the Walkers packed carefully. They weren't just bringing DNA results. They were bringing everything. The birth record, the erased hospital files, and most importantly, questions Holloway wouldn't want to answer. Tom drove them through the city until the skyscrapers faded into sprawling gated estates. Holloway's mansion sat on the outskirts of town, a fortress of wealth, with towering iron gates, security cameras, and black SUVs parked in the long driveway. As they pulled up, the gates silently opened. Ethan felt his chest tighten. "This feels like a trap." Caroline, seated next to Lily's car seat, exhaled. "We have no choice." They stepped out of the car as a team of men in suits approached. And then, from the massive oak doors, a single man emerged. Martin Holloway. He was older than Ethan expected, early 60s, with silver-streaked hair and piercing ice-blue eyes. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. But despite his expensive suit, Ethan noticed something else. His eyes weren't looking at Lily with love. They were looking at her like she was an asset. "You must be the Walkers." His voice was smooth, powerful. "Let's talk." The battle of words. The meeting took place in Holloway's grand study. The walls were lined with ancient books, and a massive mahogany desk sat in the center. Ethan, Tom, and Caroline sat opposite Holloway, who leaned back in his chair studying them. "You have something that belongs to me," Holloway finally said. Caroline bristled. "She's not a thing." Holloway's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Of course. Let's talk business, then. How much?" Ethan felt his stomach drop. "Excuse me." Tom's voice was dangerously low. "$1 million. $5 million. Name your price." Holloway waved a dismissive hand. "You're not in a position to keep her, and we both know it." Ethan's fingers curled into fists. "You think this is about money?" Holloway leaned forward, his icy stare locking onto Ethan. "Everything is about money, boy. Caroline gritted her teeth. Why did you erase her birth records? For the first time, Holloway's expression flickered. Tom pressed. We know someone wiped her existence from the system. Why? Silence. Then Holloway exhaled. Because she was never supposed to exist. Ethan's breath hitched. Amelia didn't tell me she was pregnant, Holloway admitted. She knew I wouldn't approve. And when she died, I thought that was the end of it. His eyes darkened. Until you people found her. Ethan could hear the resentment in his voice. Holloway wasn't grieving a lost daughter. He was angry that his family's name had been dragged back into scandal. Lily isn't a scandal. She's a child. Caroline's voice trembled. Holloway's fingers tapped against the desk. And what do you plan to do? Keep her, he scoffed. You think you can protect her from the people who will come after her? The air turned cold. Ethan's chest tightened. What do you mean? People who will come after her? Holloway's gaze didn't waver. I mean exactly what I said. There are people who don't want Amelia's child alive. And if you keep her, you paint a target on your backs. The realization sank in like a stone. Lily wasn't just a Holloway. She was a threat to someone else. And now, they were too. A sudden escape. Ethan barely had time to react before Tom's phone buzzed. A single text from Detective Sarah Roberts, the police officer they had been working with. Get out. Now. Ethan's heart pounded. His father stood immediately, his expression grim. Meeting's over. Holloway's gaze narrowed. What's going on? Tom didn't answer. Caroline, take Lily. Ethan, move. The walkers rushed out of the study, ignoring the protests from Holloway and his men. As soon as they reached the front door, Ethan froze. A second convoy of black SUVs had pulled into the estate, and the men stepping out weren't Holloway's lawyers. They were hired muscle. Tom cursed under his breath. We're in trouble. Ethan's phone rang. He answered immediately. Ethan. Detective Roberts' voice was sharp. Get in your car. Drive. Now. Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed Lily's car seat from his mother and ran. The Holloway guards yelled as they realized what was happening, but Tom had already started the car. The engine roared to life, tires screeching as they tore out of the driveway. Ethan barely had time to look back before he saw the other SUVs following them. His chest clenched with fear. This wasn't just a fight for custody anymore. This was a fight for survival. The chase for truth. The SUV's tires screeched against the pavement as Tom swerved onto the main road, the Holloway convoy hot on their tail. Ethan sat in the back seat, gripping Lily's car seat tightly, his pulse racing like a war drum in his ears. Caroline turned around, her breath shaky. They're following us. Ethan already knew. He could see the blacked-out SUVs through the rear window, their headlights burning through the morning mist. They weren't just watching anymore. They were hunting. His phone buzzed in his lap. He snatched it up and answered immediately. Detective Roberts. Her voice was urgent. You need to lose them. Get to the police station. Now. We're trying. Ethan shot back. Tom clenched the wheel, jaw tight. Hold on. Without warning, he yanked the wheel hard, sending the car skidding around a corner onto a side street. One SUV overshot the turn, its tires screeching against the asphalt. But two others stayed locked onto them, their engines roaring. Caroline's breathing was uneven as she clutched the dashboard. They're not giving up. Ethan's mind raced. If they went straight to the police station, the Holloway men could just claim legal custody. They needed proof. Solid evidence that Holloway wasn't trying to reclaim Lily as a loving grandfather, but to erase her completely. We need to go somewhere safe, Ethan said. Safe doesn't exist right now, son, Tom muttered, swerving onto another road. Then Ethan had a thought. What about old Joe's pawn shop? Caroline's head snapped toward him. What? He helped me before. He knows people. Maybe he can help us disappear, just for a little while. Tom didn't hesitate. Give me the address. Ethan punched it into his phone, the GPS lighting up with directions. But behind them, the SUVs were gaining. Pawn shop hideout. The old neon sign flickered above the door of Joe's Pawn and Trade, casting an eerie glow over the sidewalk. Tom barely had time to pull the car into the alleyway before Ethan flung the door open. Go, go. Caroline clutched Lily, hurrying toward the entrance as Ethan pounded on the metal door. A gruff voice came from inside. Kid, what the hell? Joe, let us in. Now. Something in Ethan's voice must have convinced him, because the lock clicked, and the door swung open. The second they were inside, Joe locked the door behind them. His bushy gray eyebrows furrowed as he looked them over. Why do you look like you just robbed a bank? Caroline caught her breath. We didn't rob a bank, but we might have stolen someone's secret. Joe's eyes flickered toward the baby in her arms. Ah, so this is about the Holloways, huh? Ethan nodded, breathing hard. They're outside, and they're not just here to talk. Joe muttered a curse under his breath. Follow me. He led them through the cluttered shop, past old vinyl records, stacks of watches, and vintage jewelry cases. Then, at the back, he pushed aside an old shelf, revealing the hidden staircase leading underground. Ethan's eyes widened. What is this? Joe smirked. Let's just say I've had a lot of people in need of a place to hide over the years. Tom didn't question it. Go. Now. The second they were inside the underground storage space, Joe locked the entrance. The room was small, with a single worn-out couch, a desk with a flickering lamp, and stacks of unmarked boxes. You're safe here. For now, Joe said, crossing his arms. But I need to know. What the hell did you people do to piss off Holloway this bad? The story unfolds. Ethan wasted no time. He pulled out his phone and showed Joe everything. The erased birth records, the private hospital files, the article about Amelia's death, and Daniel Royce's disappearance. Joe's expression darkened as he skimmed through the documents. This is bad, he muttered. Really bad. Tom exhaled, rubbing his face. We know. Joe tapped the screen. And this Royce guy, he just disappeared after Amelia died. Yeah, Ethan said, like he never existed. Joe muttered under his breath, then stood up. I know a guy. Ethan blinked. What? Joe grabbed his phone and dialed a number. I got a friend who deals with lost people, the kind who don't want to be found. If Royce is alive, he might know where to start looking. Ethan's heart pounded. If Daniel Royce was alive, he might be the only one who could testify against Holloway. The call connected, and a gravelly voice came through the speaker. Joe, been a while. I need information, Joe said, about a guy named Daniel Royce. He went off the grid a year ago. A pause. I'll look into it. Joe hung up, turning back to them. Now, we wait. Ethan felt a glimmer of hope for the first time. If they could find Daniel Royce, they could bring everything to light. The surveillance footage. While they waited, Joe started digging through old surveillance tapes from his pawn shop. This place records everything, Joe explained, fast-forwarding through footage from a year ago. Sometimes I catch things other people miss. Ethan leaned forward, watching the grainy footage flicker across the screen. And then, a familiar face appeared. Daniel Royce, standing in Joe's shop. Ethan's breath caught. Pause it. Joe froze the footage. Daniel Royce stood at the counter, holding a small silver locket. Ethan's heart pounded. Zoom in. Joe did. And there, in tiny, engraved letters, were the initials. L.H. Ethan's throat tightened. Lily Holloway. Royce had been here, in this exact pawn shop, holding something that proved he knew about his daughter. And then Ethan saw it. In the corner of the footage, a man stood in the shadows, watching Royce. A hollow feeling settled in Ethan's stomach. Joe, can you trace where Royce went after this? Joe's eyes narrowed. I can try. Ethan exhaled sharply. Do it, because I think Holloway's men were tracking him long before he disappeared. The knock at the door. Just as Joe started searching, a sudden knock echoed through the pawnshop above them. The entire room went silent. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Tom slowly stood, reaching for a metal pipe leaning against the wall. Caroline clutched Lily, holding her close. Joe's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then swore under his breath. It's not my guy. Ethan's pulse thundered. Then who is it? Joe's face was grim. It's the people who don't knock twice. A second, louder bang rattled the metal door. Tom moved quickly, positioning himself near the entrance. Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing. They had Lily. They had the birth records. But if Holloway's men were here, it meant they were running out of time. And the next move could mean life or death. Truth in the shadows. The pounding on the door grew louder. Joe's grip on the shotgun tightened. They don't knock twice, he repeated, his voice low. We have to move. Now. Caroline clutched Lily close to her chest, her breath shallow. Ethan could feel his heartbeat thudding in his ears as he exchanged a look with his father. Tom's hand curled around the metal pipe, muscles tense. How many outside? Joe's security feed flickered on the monitor. Ethan's stomach twisted. 2 black SUVs, 4 men in suits, and one of them was Jonathan Pierce, the same lawyer who had tried to buy Lily like a piece of property. Dane, Joe muttered. That guy gives me the creeps. Another pound rattled the door, followed by Pierce's voice, calm but dripping with menace. Mr. Walker, I know you're in there. There's no need for this to turn into an incident. Tom exchanged glances with Caroline and Ethan. They won't break in. Not yet. Joe kept his eyes on the screen. No, but they will soon. And once they do, we won't have the upper hand anymore. Ethan's fists curled. He wasn't going to let these men take Lily. Not after everything. He turned to Joe. You said your guy could track Daniel Royce. Did he find anything? Joe's fingers flew over his laptop keyboard, pulling up another screen. Just got a location ping. Ethan's breath caught. Where is he? Joe hesitated. Then, a motel, outside of town. Caroline's eyes widened. He's alive. Joe nodded. Looks like it. But if we wait too long, he might not be for much longer. A cold shiver ran through Ethan. If Daniel Royce had been hiding for a year, what would happen if Holloway's men got to him first? The knocking stopped. A deep silence settled over the room. Then, Pierce's voice, calm and unnerving. This is your last chance. Hand over the child, or we will come in. Joe didn't hesitate. He pressed a button under his desk, and the back wall of the basement shifted open, revealing a hidden exit tunnel. Go. Now. Tom grabbed Caroline's arm, guiding her toward the tunnel. Ethan followed close behind, heart hammering. Joe stayed behind, shotgun ready. Ethan paused at the entrance. Joe. I got this, kid, Joe said, winking. Go find Royce. Find out what the hell is really going on. Then, as Ethan disappeared into the tunnel, he heard the sound of wood splintering as the Holloway men forced the door open. And Joe's voice, steady, calm, unshaken. I'd rethink that move, boys. Then the blast of a shotgun. The last witness. The motel parking lot was half empty, the flickering neon VACANCW sign casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. Tom pulled into a space, engine still running. Are you sure about this? Caroline whispered, glancing back at Lily. Ethan nodded. Royce is the only one who knows the truth. If we don't find him first, Holloway will. Caroline hesitated. What if he doesn't want to be found? Tom exhaled. Then we make him listen. They stepped out of the car, moving cautiously. The motel was run down, the kind of place people went when they wanted to disappear. Ethan's pulse quickened as they reached room 12. The door was slightly ajar. His father raised a hand, signaling for them to stay back. Then, with one swift motion, he pushed the door open. The room was dark, the only light coming from a TV screen flashing static. And in the farthest corner, a man sat slumped against the wall, his face hidden in shadows. Ethan's stomach clenched. Daniel Royce. The figure flinched. Slowly, he raised his head. Ethan barely recognized him from the photos. Royce looked thin, his once strong frame now frail, his eyes hollow and haunted. "Who are you?" His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Ethan stepped forward. "We found Lily." Royce froze. His breath hitched, his hands shaking. Lily. Caroline gently held up the baby, still wrapped in her soft blanket. "Your daughter." Royce's face crumbled. "Oh my God." The truth comes out. The air in the motel room felt thick with unspoken words. Royce's hands trembled as he reached toward Lily, but he hesitated, as if afraid he'd break her. Caroline eased the baby into his arms. Royce's breath shuddered as he cradled his daughter. She's real." His voice cracked. "I thought she was gone." Ethan's throat tightened. "What happened?" "Royce." Daniel's eyes darkened. "Holloway happened." Silence. Then Royce exhaled shakily, his fingers gripping the baby's tiny hand. "Amelia and I, we wanted to run. We knew her father would never let us raise Lily together." Tom's jaw tightened. "And the car crash." Royce's breath hitched. His hands curled into fists. "It wasn't an accident." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Holloway wanted Amelia to give up Lily. She refused. So he had her taken care of." Caroline gasped, a hand over her mouth. Royce's voice grew raw. "They came for me next. I barely escaped. But I knew if I took Lily, they'd find us both. So I left her somewhere safe." His haunted gaze locked onto Ethan's. "I left her in the park, praying someone like you would find her before they did." Ethan's heart pounded. The pieces all fell into place. Amelia was murdered. Daniel was hunted. Lily was erased. And now, they were all in danger. A dangerous escape. A car engine rumbled outside. Tom moved to the window, peering through the blinds. His face turned grim. "They found us." Ethan's chest tightened. Royce clutched Lily tightly, his entire body trembling. "They'll kill me if they know I'm alive." Tom moved fast. "We go out the back. Now." Caroline wrapped Lily securely in her arms. Ethan grabbed their bags. Royce looked pale, but he forced himself to his feet. They slipped out the back door, into the dark alleyway behind the motel. But as they turned the corner, a black SUV skidded to a stop in front of them. Pierce stepped out, his face calm. Game over. Behind him, 3 other men in black suits emerged. Royce froze. No, please." Pierce's eyes flickered toward Lily. "You've all caused quite a mess. But it ends here." Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. His father stepped forward, shielding Caroline and Royce. But Pierce just smiled. "Mr. Holloway has offered you one final deal." He gestured toward the SUV. "Give us the child, and walk away." Silence. Then Ethan's voice. Steady, cold. "No." Pierce's expression didn't change. "That's disappointing." Then, the men in suits reached for their weapons, and everything exploded into chaos. A fight for freedom. The night air in the motel alleyway was thick with tension. 4 armed men, 1 black SUV. And behind them, Jonathan Pierce stood like a vulture, his calm smile more terrifying than any gun. "Give us the child," Pierce repeated, his voice smooth and final. "No one has to get hurt." Tom stepped forward, his body shielding Caroline and Lily. Ethan stood beside him, fists clenched. Daniel Royce, pale and trembling, took an instinctive step back, his eyes darting to the darkness around them like a caged animal. "No, I won't let you take her. Pierce sighed, shaking his head. Mr. Royce, I'd hoped you'd be smarter. You should have stayed dead. Then he lifted a hand, and his men reached for their guns. The attack. Crack. A gunshot rang through the alley. Ethan flinched, his body tensing, except no one was hit. One of Holloway's men stumbled backward, blood blossoming from his shoulder. More gunfire followed, but it wasn't from them. From the motel rooftop, a sniper took aim again. Ethan's heart pounded as another Holloway enforcer went down. Tom reacted instantly. Run. Ethan grabbed Royce by the wrist, dragging him toward the only exit at the end of the alley. Caroline, clutching Lily, took off sprinting. Pierce's men, now in disarray, turned their weapons toward the sniper. The distraction gave them just enough time. Tom threw open the side door of an old truck, hot wiring the engine in record time. Get in. Ethan dove into the passenger seat as Royce and Caroline scrambled into the back. The moment the doors slammed shut, Tom slammed his foot on the gas. The truck roared to life, just as bullets shattered the back windshield. Caroline screamed, shielding Lily as shards of glass rained down. Ethan twisted in his seat. Mom, are you? I'm okay, she shouted over the wind. Lily wailed, terrified, but alive. Daniel Royce pressed himself against the seat, eyes wide, breath ragged. They won't stop, he whispered. Ethan turned back to his father. Then we make sure they can't find us. Tom gritted his teeth and slammed the truck into a hard left turn, tires screeching as they disappeared into the city. The SUVs couldn't follow through the narrow streets. They were gone. For now. Nowhere left to run. They drove for hours. No one spoke. Lily had fallen into exhausted sleep, her tiny fingers curled into Caroline's sweater. Royce stared blankly out the window, his entire body shaking. Finally, Tom pulled into an abandoned warehouse parking lot, cutting the engine. Silence. Caroline exhaled, her fingers shaking as she stroked Lily's head. What now? Ethan turned to Royce. You have to tell us everything. Now. Royce swallowed. His eyes, hollow, haunted, finally met Ethan's. And then he told them the whole truth. The final piece of the puzzle. Amelia and I were never supposed to be together, Royce said, his voice raw. He ran a shaking hand through his hair. Martin Holloway is obsessed with his legacy. He controls his family like a corporation. When Amelia got pregnant, he saw Lily as a threat, someone who could inherit everything. Tom frowned. That doesn't explain why he erased Lily's birth records. Royce let out a bitter laugh. Because she wasn't just a financial threat. She was an illegitimate one. Caroline's breath caught. What? Royce's gaze dropped. Amelia had a secret. She wasn't Martin Holloway's biological daughter. Ethan's stomach dropped. Royce continued. Her mother had an affair. When Martin found out, he was furious. But instead of divorcing his wife, he covered it up, raised Amelia as his own, forced his wife into silence. Caroline looked horrified. He built his empire on a lie. Exactly. Royce exhaled. And when Lily was born, she became a reminder of that lie. He couldn't let that truth come out. So he tried to erase her. And when Amelia refused, he had her killed. The room fell into suffocating silence. Ethan felt sick. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, legacy, control. Lily wasn't just in hair. She was a living piece of proof that Martin Holloway wasn't the great businessman he pretended to be. And that meant he would never stop hunting her. The last stand. Ethan's hands curled into fists. Then we stop running. Royce blinked. What? We take this public, Ethan said, voice firm. We show the world who Holloway really is. Tom's jaw clenched, but he nodded. We'll need proof. Caroline grabbed Ethan's hand. The locket, the birth records, everything. Royce looked terrified. You don't understand. He has powerful people on his side. If you do this, he already tried to kill us, Ethan cut in. So either we keep running forever, or we take him down. Royce was silent for a long time. Then he exhaled and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a flash drive. "This is everything," he whispered. "Every secret I recorded before I ran. Financial fraud, bribes, deals with dangerous people. If this gets out, Holloway is finished." Ethan took the flash drive, his fingers tightening around it. "Then let's end this." The expose. The next 24 hours were a blur. With Royce's evidence, they contacted every major news outlet in the country. They sent copies of the files to the police, the FBI, and multiple reporters. And then, they went live. Ethan sat beside Royce in a small studio, the camera rolling. Royce took a deep breath and began telling the world everything. The Holloway cover-up, the erased birth records, the murder of Amelia. The world watched as the great Martin Holloway's empire began to crumble. Justice served. Within days, the FBI launched an official investigation. Within weeks, Martin Holloway was arrested, charged with conspiracy, fraud, and murder. The Holloway name, once untouchable, became a stain of corruption. The men who had hunted Lily, all arrested. Jonathan Pierce, disbarred. And finally, Lily was safe. A new beginning. Months later, Ethan sat on the back porch, watching the sunset. Lily, now almost a year old, sat beside him, playing with a stuffed rabbit. Royce had reclaimed his name, now officially her father again. But he never forgot what the Walkers had done for him. Caroline and Tom had fought to protect a child that wasn't theirs. But she was now. Because they were more than just people who had found her. They were family. Ethan smiled down at her. "You have no idea how lucky you are, do you?" Lily just giggled, clapping her tiny hands. Ethan chuckled, ruffling her hair. After everything, they had won.